The deadliest events in U.S. history, from pandemics to wars to natural disasters, these events took the highest toll on American lives. It's a grim calculation, counting those Americans who have died in service to their country, as targets of terrorist attacks, amid natural disasters or as victims of pandemic disease. Here are major events from history that have inflicted a devastating toll on American lives. The COVID-19 pandemic, death toll, 1 million. In early 2020, the first reports circulated of a deadly and contagious new respiratory disease centered in Wuhan, a city in China. The novel strain of coronavirus claimed its first American victims in February, and COVID-19, as the disease became known, erupted into a full-blown public health crisis by March, triggering widespread shutdowns of U.S. schools and businesses, and stay-at-home orders in panicked states nationwide. Despite the new vaccines, COVID-19 cases and deaths continued as new variants of the virus emerged, and some Americans remained reluctant to become vaccinated. By May 2022, 1 million deaths from COVID-19 had been reported nationwide since the start of the pandemic. The September 11th terrorist attacks, death tolls, 2,974. Nothing about the clear blue skies on the morning of September 11, 2001 hinted that America was about to be the victim of the deadliest foreign assault ever on U.S. soil. Then at 8:46 a.m., the first hijacked commercial airliner slammed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. As news cameras were fixed on the plume of black smoke pouring from the crippled North Tower, a second plane crashed into the South Tower with a terrific explosion. Next came the attack on the Pentagon, followed by the heroic downing of the hijacked Flight 93 in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. All told, 2,974 people were killed in the 9/11 attacks, which President George W. Bush called evil, despicable acts of terror, and acts of mass murder. In the decades since, nearly 4,000 firemen and first responders have died from cancers and other 9/11-related medical conditions. The U.S. Civil War, death tolls, 750,000. The awful death toll of the Civil War may never fully be known. For more than a century, the number was enshrined at 618,222 fatalities, 360,222 from the Union North and 258,000 from the Confederate South. But in recent decades, historians raised the number to an estimated 750,000 deaths, mostly blamed on the undercounting of Confederate casualties. The HIV/AIDS epidemic, death tolls, 700,000. In 1981, doctors began reporting mysterious cases of rare types of pneumonia and cancers among predominantly gay men in New York and California. The condition, which was later found in blood transfusion recipients and intravenous drug users, was given a name by the CDC in 1982, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome or AIDS. The 1918 flu pandemic, death tolls, 675,000. The 1918 flu claimed an unfathomable 50 to 100 million victims worldwide, including an estimated 675,000 Americans. Wrongfully labeled the Spanish flu, the first confirmed case of this virulent strain of influenza was actually a U.S. Army cook stationed in Kansas in March of 1918. Spring fatalities from the 1918 flu were similar to the seasonal flu, but after the virus followed troop deployments overseas during World War I, it resurged in the fall with deadly vengeance. October of 1918 was the worst single month of the pandemic, claiming almost 200,000 American lives. World War II, death tolls, 405,400. The bitter terms of Germany's surrender in World War I crippled the German economy and bred both contempt for the Allied powers and anti-Semitic conspiracies of a Jewish/communist plot to destroy Germany from within. Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist, Nazi, Party rode to power in 1933 and put plans in motion to establish an Aryan German Empire. The United States, as it did during World War I, held back as England, France, and other nations declared war on Hitler. But after the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the U.S. declared war on both Japan and Germany, and joined the Allies in the heroic beach invasion at Normandy, in which more than 4,400 Allied troops were killed in a span of days. At the Battle of Okinawa, the deadliest single battle for the United States, more than 12,500 American troops lost their lives on the rain-soaked rock. In total, 405,400 U.S. servicemen died in World War II, the deadliest American war waged on foreign soil. World War I, death tolls, 116,516, Europe slid into war in 1914, but the United States, under President Woodrow Wilson, vowed to remain neutral in the foreign conflict. But after German torpedoes sank the passenger ship Lusitania in 1915, killing 120 Americans, public sentiment began to shift. The U.S. declared war on Germany on April 6, 1917, and deployed hundreds of thousands of conscripted young men to the trench-scarred battlefields of Europe to face German bullets and bayonets, tank artillery, poison gas and disease. A sobering total of 116,516 Americans died in the War to End All Wars, which concluded with an armistice declaring Allied victory at exactly 11 a.m. on November 11, 1918. If the war had kept up a few hours longer, there wouldn't be many of us left to tell about it, wrote U.S. serviceman Harry Freeman in his journal entry for that fateful day. The Vietnam War, death tolls, 58,220. America's long and unpopular war with communist North Vietnam began as a targeted military intervention and devolved into a decade-long war of attrition. As anti-war protesters took to the streets of America burning draft cards, millions of young men were shipped out to fight in the jungles and rice paddies of Southeast Asia against an unflagging enemy. A total of 58,220 servicemen gave their lives in the Vietnam War. The worst and bloodiest fighting spanned 1967 to 1969, when more than 40,000 American soldiers were killed in the months and years surrounding the Tet Offensive. The United States ultimately withdrew from Southeast Asia, ceding control of Vietnam to the Communists. The Korean War, death tolls, 36,914, dubbed the Forgotten War. The Korean War was a major conflagration between armed nuclear powers that ultimately cost the lives of 36,914 U.S. servicemen. The Korean War was the first test of the United Nations, which sent in troops to defend South Korea after a June 25, 1950 invasion by Communist North Korea backed by China and the Soviet Union. Nearly 2 million American troops were deployed during 3 years of fighting, which ended in a bloody stalemate, with neither side gaining or losing their pre-war territory divided at the 38th parallel. The 1900 Galveston hurricane, death tolls, 8,000. The hurricane that battered the island city of Galveston, Texas with 150 miles per hour winds and drowned it with 15-foot storm surges remains the deadliest natural disaster in American history. An estimated 8,000 men, women and children were killed during the Category 4 storm, which lifted thousands of houses off their moorings and smashed them to pieces on September 8 and 9. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake and fire, death tolls, 3,000. At the turn of the 20th century, San Francisco was a western boom town with a population of 400,000, many of them crowded into hastily constructed wood and brick tenements in the city's poorer South of Market district. At 5:13 a.m. on April 18, 1906, Northern California was jolted awake by a massive earthquake that ruptured 296 miles of the San Andreas Fault, the violent shaking, which lasted an agonizing 45 to 60 seconds, toppled buildings across San Francisco, including City Hall, which was reduced to a skeleton wearing a domed hat. But even deadlier than the earthquake and its aftershocks were the fires that tore through the overcrowded tenements and burned for 4 days. An estimated 3,000 people died in the disaster, which leveled 500 city blocks and left more than 200,000 San Francisco residents homeless.